Gavin Newsom's got a new podcast called This is Gavin Newsom. If you're somebody that's on the right, if you lean a little bit conservative, I think this is something you need to keep an eye on because everybody's making fun of it, but he's literally tearing a page out of Republicans' success book. It's one of the main reasons that in the last elections, it was a red landslide, right? Now, you might say, well, Gavin Newsom's already got mainstream media. Yeah, he does, but nobody's watching it. Let's get into it. Here we go. Sky News Australia. Let's watch a little Sky News.
Oh, and also to talk about Doge, because cutting waste is something we should all fear. And of course, Gavin Newsom will be the one to tell you all about that.
We need to change the conversation. And that's why I'm launching a new podcast. And this is going to be anything but the ordinary politician podcast. I'm going to be talking to people directly that I disagree with, as well as people I look up to. But more important than anything else, I'll be talking directly with you, the listener. Real conversations. What's going on with the cost of eggs? What are the impacts, real impacts to you around tariffs? What power does an executive order really have? And what's really going on inside of Doge? Look, there's an onslaught of information that we take in. So let's take it to the sources without the typical political mumbo jumbo. In the first few weeks, we're going to be sitting down with some of the biggest leaders and architects in the mega movement. This is Gavin Newsom.
It is so cringe, it is so tone deaf to be promoting himself at a time while Californians are still suffering. Where are the answers on the fires? Because he's just been spinning and deflecting.
She says it's cringe. Yeah, it's cringe, but it's effective because those are the topics that Democrats are like, what are we doing here? Mainstream media is just clueless. You can see in their numbers. You can see in Rachel Maddow's numbers. I mean, she's making 25, 30 million, whatever it is. Nobody's watching. I mean, it's laughable, right? So you got to look around and go, okay, what are the winners doing? What are the winners doing? Republicans, they're doing podcasts because they've had to, right? I mean, you've just got influencer after influencer after influencer that's been fired. Tucker Carlson, good example. Dan Bongino, good example, that have been fired from, arguably right-wing mainstream media because of their positions on just basically telling the truth. They go out and do their own thing. You got Joe Rogan now being cited as right-wing media, extreme right-wing media. You got Charlie Kirk, and that's his first guest on today's podcast. If you don't know who Charlie Kirk is, he runs Turning Point America. He's 31. He goes to college campuses and just basically has conversations with liberals. And it does not go well for the liberals. Turn into Charlie Kirk. I mean, it's hilarious. Gavin Newsom is taking a page out of that playbook and going, I'm going to do that. I think it is the beginning point of Democrats. Say what you want, but I think it's the Democrats pivoting. Pivoting is the word I'm looking for. And it starts with Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom should have gotten the nod when Kamala Harris did, but I think it just wasn't quite his time. Let's keep going.
Since the disaster.
I don't know what he's referring to when he talks about the Delta smelt in reservoirs. The reservoirs are completely full. The state reservoirs here in Southern California, that mis and disinformation, I don't think advantages or aids any of us. Responding to Donald Trump's insults, we would spend another month. I'm very familiar with them. Every elected official that he disagrees with, very familiar with them.
We do know, though, from reporting here locally that one reservoir that serves the Palisades was not full.
And that's exactly what triggered my desire to get the investigation.
So what is Gavin Newsom?
Okay. Just gets called out, right? Just gets 100% called out. And he's like, because he was talking about state reservoirs versus city reservoirs versus county reservoirs. I mean, you've got all those distinctions. And he's saying state reservoirs were full. Altadena, what was it? Santa Ynez Reservoir, I think it is. The empty one that was above Pacific Palisades, it was empty. And he said, not my fault. That's why I need to get an investigation on it. Let's keep going.
I'm really trying to do here by launching a podcast. Be the next Joe Rogan? Well, that's not going to work because the world's most successful podcaster has absolutely slammed Gavin Newsom for this, posting on X, if the ick was a podcast.
You're Schellenberger. Yeah. Look what Schellenberger says. You cut fire prevention. LA burned. You spent $24 billion on homelessness. It rose 40%. You reduced penalties for a violent crime, 31% higher in California than the U.S. as a whole. And instead of taking responsibility, you're trying to become an influencer. It's pathetic. Okay, you can see it that way, or you can see, hey, there needs to be a path forward for Democrats. This is one of the ways that is proven. This is it. Now, say all you want, but the reason there's so many people on the right is because we can't do it anywhere else. The reason that there's so many people on the right doing their own podcast, doing independent, on Rumble, trying to get by on YouTube, because we get censored and censored on YouTube all the time. It's a disaster. It's like, which topic can't I talk about today? Well, Gavin Newsom's going to be able to talk about whatever, because he's just going to get an absolute, there you go. Here's your voice. We'll see how he does. Here's Dave Portnoy. Barstool Sports. Let's start with, why did you throw a party for yourself at the French Laundry when no masks on in the middle of COVID? California had just about the strictest COVID regulations in the country, and thousands of small businesses were going out of business because of said policies. Gavin Newsom, if he wants to be president, he has to shrug off all of that. He has to brush that off and keep moving. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to rebrand here. He's trying to come up with a new spin, a new image. Will it work? Well, you know what I did is I looked, one of the things I did for this podcast is I looked up, all right, top conservative and liberal talk podcasts. And then you've got conservative and liberal podcasts. Okay, I knew every single one of the ones on the left. Yeah, you just know it. Even the Alex Jones show, number 9, InfoWars. I mean, that guy has just been through the grinder, right? I mean, people on the right, people on the left, Pod Save America. I've heard of that one. The Young Turks, of course. But then Rumble with Michael Moore. Okay, know who he is. Rachel Maddow show. Number 6 on MSNBC. Really? That's the best you have. That is number 6 on this list. The other ones, I don't know who they are. Some of that has to do with the fact that I clearly don't watch any left-wing stuff, because it's just malarkey. It's just nonsense. It's just absolutely not worth my time, because most of the time, if you look at policy, it doesn't make any sense at all. So one of the things that Gavin Newsom did in this podcast, he went against the left theory on trans men or trans women being in women's sports. Boys and girls should not be competing. It's a hard no-go. No men in women's sports, period. What was it? Somebody was writing, I forget who that was. I think it was maybe Mace was writing, no balls in women's stalls. That's fair. Absolutely. If we could follow that, no balls in women's stalls. That's a pretty easy one to follow, right? All right. So, deeply unfair for transgender athletes to compete in women's sports. These are 5 takeaways from Gavin Newsom's most recent podcast that the left is saying, oh, this isn't good. We can't have that. That's awful. And what the left is most upset about and most afraid of, Gavin Newsom kicks off his podcast with MAGA war on trans people. You know what? This is Gavin Newsom shifting to the right, shifting to the center, shifting towards trying to appear reasonable. That's why this is frightening, because he's going down a reasonable approach. The way that he handled this interview with Charlie Kirk, I mean, it was smart. It was smart, in my opinion, because he is now appearing like he cares about women. He cares about girls. This is absolutely crazy that we have men competing against women who claim that they are women because they claim that they are women. They're not women. Just hard no-go on that. Boys should not be competing against girls in girls' sports. You want to give them their own league to compete in? I'm all for that. No problem. But girls compete against girls, boys against boys, no balls in women's stalls. That to me is fair. That is fair. California Governor Gavin Newsom shattered his reputation as an advocate for LGBTQ rights. Okay, say he did. Nobody really cares because people who are really into the LGBTQ thing, that's such a small percentage of the population. Gavin Newsom knows this. You could just totally get rid of all of your support for LGBTQ. And you know what? It would probably be better for your voter base. Now you've got some of those people in the center or even slightly right of center going, oh, okay. Yeah, well, I agree more with his policies over there. But that whole LGBTQ stuff, I couldn't really get on board with that at all. And he betrayed the Democratic Party on Thursday. Well, so what if he did? How badly did the Democrats lose in that last election? Give you a minute to respond. Badly. So clearly Democrats aren't doing something right? Let's change it up. Let's mix it up. Because I think the Republicans want to say, Democratic Party has lost its soul. They've just been pushed down. They've been crushed. There's no way they're going to emerge from the ashes. That's never the way that it goes. Remember, they said that about the Republican Party one election ago. Republicans are done. And Republicans were literally just flailing around because a lot of the causes that were out there, you had the whole George Floyd thing. You had a bunch of stuff like that did not go Republicans' way. And with mainstream media, Democrats were able to push their agenda, just boom, push it through. Well, now all of those things, we've seen what happens when you allow a domestic terror organization like Black Lives Matter to just basically have their way with America. Couple billion in insured damage, 5 billion in insured and uninsured damage. And we're familiar with what damage looks like across the USA due to the wildfires we've seen in LA, on Maui. We know what fire looks like. And that is what Black Lives Matter stood for during that whole 2020 deal, right? In the debut episode of his new podcast, This is Gavin Newsom, Newsom broke with his own party's stance on trans rights and suggested that transgender athletes should not be allowed to participate in women's sports. A spineless move from the Democrat who was likely preparing for a presidential run in 2028. So the Republicans are going to go, look at him. Look at this guy. Look at what he's doing. His own party is going to say, oh man, he has turned his back on us. But he's the only one that, in my opinion, has got a shot at leadership in 2028. He's it. Who else do you have? Literally, who else do you have? Tampon Tim? Oh, I mean, that would just be merciless, right? Absolutely merciless. So let me get this right. You put tampon machines into elementary students as young as 4th grade in the boys' restrooms? Most of America is going to look at that and go, what in the actual F? And say the same thing about Newsom. It's going to be one long montage by the Republicans of homelessness, him sitting with the mask on in the restaurant where he's not supposed to, shutting down all of California over, ridiculous COVID-19, crime escalating, homelessness. Those are the clips that they're going to be able to. You spent $24 billion on homelessness and it increased by 40% in the last 5-6 years. So Newsom's doing something. He's pivoting. He's pivoting to the right. For decades, Newsom has been a strong supporter of LGBTQ rights because that's what the left, that was their flagship, LGBTQ, even though it's such a small percentage of the population. First episode of Gavin Newsom's new podcast is genuinely humiliating. This is from San Francisco Gate. This is left-wing stuff here. Column, San Francisco tech reporter Stephen Council, listen to Newsom chat up a right-wing influencer so you don't have to. He's sticking it to his own guy just because. So first episode of Gavin Newsom dropped Thursday and featuring a smug and in his element Charlie Kirk as a guest. Charlie Kirk, best known for debating liberals. Kirk is inflammatory, 31-year-old inflammatory. He brings a level of reasonable to college campuses. Now, I don't know if you've seen college campuses. Have you seen the lunatics that have been protesting on college campuses, and then college campuses just allowing these nut jobs to go after the Jewish students? It's unbelievable. It is absolutely nuts. So the governor has positioned his new show not as the Ordinary Politician podcast, but as a place for civil debate. The surprise was how embarrassingly Newsom performed. I don't think he performed embarrassingly. The only reason you as San Francisco Gate would consider this embarrassing is because he became reasonable. He's pivoting so that he can get elected. That's what you need to be afraid of. Kamala Harris did the exact same damn thing. You know, we were told for years that the border was closed. Oh, it's closed. It's all good. 302,000 people rush across it December of 2023. Oh, it's closed. We're watching, drone footage in Eagle Pass of literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people in Shelby Park in Eagle Pass. And you're like, it doesn't look that close to me. Kamala Harris had to try and do a spin. Oh, yeah, we're going to really crack down on that if we just had some legislation. Governor came across as unprepared, malleable, and strangely self-effacing. He pushed back only occasionally and only on Kirk's most absurd claims. See, absurd claims. He let Kirk crow about President Donald Trump being a cultural phenomenon. Isn't he? Is he not? Is Donald Trump not a cultural phenomenon? He is, whether you want to admit it, either on the right or the left. He's a phenomenon. And he stood by as the influencer framed social debates in overdramatic terms. Well, that is where the left has lost its marbles. You guys aren't getting it. You guys just don't get it. The vast majority of people, the American people, don't really care about trans rights, don't want to see boys playing in women's sports, and a whole bunch of other stuff that you guys think is so important. DEI. Well, Trump's taken a big whack to that. Bunch of ridiculous spending on stuff that's clearly just straight up racist. Racist. Yeah, white people can't do that. Oh, everybody else, you betcha. Go for it. Here's what's funny. Perhaps most bizarrely, Newsom repeatedly mentioned how his 13-year-old son is a fan of Kirk. A lot of kids are. My son is. My son's 31, same age as Charlie Kirk. Big fan, because he talks in reasonable terms and he makes sense. Left-wing Democrats do not. And your policies and everything that you stand on, and even the folks that you have in office. That one chick from Texas who got up there and went, Trump? I mean, if you want to keep digging your own hole, go for it. Just keep going for it, because you're doing a great job. Whereas in my opinion, Newsom is at least trying something new. Do I like his podcast? No. Will I watch it? Yes. I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of podcasts where I've picked apart California policies because things aren't going well in California. They're just simply not. You got a whole litany of things that are just like, okay, we'll see how that works out. And it's that inevitable train wreck where it just goes sideways. With young people, you're making a damn dent, Newsom told Kirk admiringly. He is. Charlie Kirk is. Along with a whole bunch of other influencers who have basically been pushed to the sidelines by mainstream media because Democratic Party didn't want to have their influence out there. And now that everybody's independent, everybody's got their own podcast, everybody's up and running, and mainstream media can't control it, Gavin Newsom's joining in. That's what you're watching. But no part of the episode better epitomizes Newsom's humiliating performance when the two men's discussion of trans athletes. Topic came up as Newsom contrasted his party's aimlessness against Kirk and other Republicans' approaching of 24/7, flooding the zone with content and messaging. Republicans have really turned the page on that, right? I mean, we're putting up podcast after podcast after podcast on why things shouldn't be going the way they are and how you can make them better and what you can do. I'm sitting here in Seattle. I've got podcasts for days. There is stuff coming out of Seattle every single day that you point at and go, bad policy, terrible policy, horrific policy. And here's the end result. Keep voting blue if you want to have that keep happening. Aurora Avenue North, one of the perfect examples. It was just recently highlighted. Actually, let's get to that. Dana Loesch warns Republicans to see danger in California Governor Newsom's rebrand for 2028. Yeah, I agree. Because he's coming in with a new angle and people are flipping out. That means he's doing something right. In my opinion. Conservative radio host Dana Loesch, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, let me know. I'm sure you will in the comments. Warned Republicans Thursday evening on Fox News about the danger in Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom's rebrand ahead of the 2028 presidential election. And here's how that interview went. Sometimes I wonder if Democrats weeping and gnashing of teeth isn't performative for a reason. I mean, you can't look any more mentally challenged than if you just look through the libs of TikTok, right? I mean, those people are insane. Like, they may not be kind of goofy most of the time, right? But there are, and I'm loath to say this, some pretty strategically savvy ones within the Democratic Party. They're lost. They're out in the desert. They have no message, no leader, nowhere to go. They have no other way to push back against the relentless, glorious onslaught that's come from the Trump administration right now. So what do? You got to do something. When you're down, when your heels are back because you've been, pushed off and you're literally on your defenses, meaning you're on the heels of your feet instead of the balls, moving forward, attacking, you're back, you're just defending yourself. What do? You come up with something new. Come up with a podcast. All right, this is Gavin Newsom. And here's where I think this paragraph right here, they can't go any further left. Where is there to go further left? I mean, you end up lapping yourself at that point, going a full circle. So they have to go all the way in the middle, and Gavin Newsom is how they're floating it. Loesch said. So he hosts his podcast where he doesn't go on anybody else's shows. He brings them on his, Joe Rogan style, right? So he establishes relevancy for himself beyond 2026, which is the end of his term as governor, when he turns out. So he has this platform and he's going to use it as a marketing tool to help leverage him into the White House. That's the goal. That is the goal. That's why you should be afraid of this podcast. And, maybe afraid isn't the right word, but keep an eye on it. Gavin Newsom is transitioning into Mr. Moderate to inoculate himself from his disastrous record. That's Breitbart. Got a few from Breitbart here. LGBTQ caucus sickened and disgusted after Newsom turns on trans athletes because most of America doesn't believe that boys should compete in girls' sports. Period. Hard stop. That should have never been a thing. Charlie Kirk to Gavin Newsom. Democrats don't represent majority of the country because they have become so college credentialized and snobbish. 100% true. They're the party of the intellect. And a lot of America, a lot of the folks that voted for Trump, they don't have college degrees and they understand. They're more of a Joe Rogan type podcast follower. Gavin Newsom, he's going to try and come in and shake some of that up. We'll see how it goes. I don't know that the transition for a Democrat into podcasting world is going to be as advantageous as those on the right who have done it, including myself, because you can't really, without your own podcast, you can't really get anywhere, right? Will Democrats who are used to being spoon-fed by mainstream media, will this make sense to them? Will they tune in? Will they watch it? Perfect example of where they didn't watch it was Kamala Harris during the presidential, when we're supposed to be doing debates. And instead, Trump said, you know what? Go screw yourself. I'm going to go on the podcast route. And that's what he did. Kamala Harris went on Call Her Daddy and the other one, which was, I'm forgetting the name of that right now. But she only got a few million views. And between Trump and JD Vance, they got, 75 million views, just boom, like that. And Kamala Harris, nobody wanted to watch Kamala Harris due to her word soup thing for 3 hours. Just a hard no-go. Will they listen to Gavin Newsom? I think some of them certainly will. So keep an eye on it. Plus, it's kind of entertaining to see what he says, see what kind of spins he makes, see what kind of pivots he makes. Either way, entertainment. That's it for me. Thanks so much for being here. Catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.